I didn't expect the world to stop spinning when I sent that message, just a few words, typed slowly, thumb trembling over each letter. Mom misses you. That was all. No guilt, no pleading, no explanations. Just the truth, soft and small like a paper boat in a storm. And then just like that, the message thread disappeared. Vanished from my screen. At first I thought it was a glitch. I tapped back, refreshed. Checked my connection, but when I clicked their name, all I saw was a blank profile, an empty gray circle where their picture had been. No last seen. No typing. Nothing. And I knew. I had been blocked. My own child, the one I carried, fed, rocked to sleep through fevers and nightmares, had erased me with one tap. I sat still for a long time, phone resting in my lap like a stone. The house was quiet the way it always is now. The clock on the wall ticked softly, like it was trying not to disturb me. The tea had gone cold. I stared at the screen, hoping for a mistake, a change of heart, a second chance. But silence stretched on, the kind of silence that doesn't just fill the room. It presses against your ribs, makes it hard to breathe. I think I said their name out loud. Just once. Just to hear it. Just to feel like it hadn't disappeared with the thread. What did I expect when I sent that message? I drafted it in my head a dozen times over. Sometimes it was longer, sometimes it was angry. Sometimes it begged. But I thought maybe, just maybe, keeping it short would help. Keep it honest. Keep it human. Mom misses you. I'd even added a little heart at first, then deleted it, afraid it might seem manipulative. I wanted to be soft. I wanted to be real. And now, apparently, I was gone. It felt like a slap, but quieter. Like a door shutting in a dream. No noise. But suddenly, you're on the other side, and you don't know how you got there. I didn't cry. Not right away. I went into the kitchen, opened a cupboard, closed it. I wandered into the living room, picked up a blanket, folded it, put it back. I did everything slowly, like I was underwater, like grief was molasses, and I was trying to move through it without disturbing anything. Eventually, I sat on the edge of the bed and held the phone in both hands. My fingers are older now, stiff in the mornings, a little swollen in the joints, but they still remember the shape of their face, the way I used to trace the soft curve of their cheek when they were just a baby, warm and breathing against my chest. How many times had I checked their temperature with the back of my hand? How many shoelaces tied? How many lunchboxes packed? I held that phone like it was the last piece of them I had left. You don't expect your child to block you. You expect friends to fall away, lovers to leave, even siblings to grow distant. But not your child. Not the one you tucked in every night for over a decade. Not the one who used to reach for your hand in crowded places, who once whispered, "You're my favorite person in the world, Mommy." I can still hear that tiny voice. It echoes louder now somehow, the kind of echo that doesn't fade. I know people will say, they must have had a reason. I'm not denying that. I'm sure they did. Maybe I made mistakes I didn't realize. Maybe I said things I shouldn't have, or didn't say the things they needed. I'm not perfect. God knows I've had to apologize more times than I can count. But that doesn't make this feel any less brutal. It doesn't make being erased feel less cruel. And the worst part is I don't even get to know why. No trial, no verdict, just a disappearance. That night I sat with all the lights off, watching the blinking red numbers on the microwave. I listened to the creaks of the house, the groan of the refrigerator, the sounds of an old place still breathing even when the people are gone. I thought about calling someone an old friend maybe, but I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to say the words out loud. My child blocked me. I felt ashamed. as if being cut off meant I had failed some sacred test, broken some silent rule I didn't even know I was supposed to follow. I slept poorly, dreams full of closed doors and disappearing faces. I woke up thinking maybe it had all been a mistake, that maybe they'd unblock me, that maybe there'd be a message waiting, something like, "Sorry, I just needed space." But no, just silence. My message still said delivered, but there would be no reply. Ever. The morning was gray, and I sat by the window with my tea holding the mug close, like it could keep me from falling apart. I thought about the past, not the big moments, but the small ones. The times we laughed at nothing, the drives where we sang to old songs the way they used to rest their head on my shoulder during movies. Where did all that go? Did it mean nothing, or was it simply not enough? I don't have answers, only echoes, only this hollow space where something warm used to live. I sent a message. I told the truth, and I was erased. I still cook too much. Old habits die hard, I suppose. The recipes are written into my hands. How many turns of the wrist for the pepper? How long to let the garlic bloom in the pan before adding the onions? I don't even have to think. My body remembers what my heart tries to forget. Today it was chicken stew, the kind they use to love thick, with carrots and potatoes, a splash of soy sauce, just the way they liked it. I even made the rice fresh, not the leftover kind from the fridge, because they used to say it tasted better that way. I set the table before I realized what I was doing. 3 plates, 3 bowls, chopsticks in neat pairs, and then I stood there staring at the chairs. The air felt too still, like the room had been holding its breath. I reached for a chair and pulled it out slightly, as if someone might walk in and sit down. No footsteps, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I left the chair pulled out like a question. It's strange the way loneliness shows itself, not always in grand cinematic ways, not always sobbing on the floor or screaming into pillows. Sometimes it's in the clink of a spoon against an empty bowl. Sometimes it's in the way you glance toward the door every few minutes pretending not to. Sometimes it's in setting out 3 plates when you only need 1. I sat down at the table and tried to eat, but everything tasted too salty, maybe from the soy sauce, maybe from the way my throat kept tightening. The food sat in my mouth like guilt. I chewed slowly, thinking of all the times I used to scold them for not finishing their dinner. "Don't waste it," I used to say. I worked hard on that, and they'd roll their eyes, or pout, or argue. But then they'd eat. Eventually, they always did. I would give anything to argue again. I remember the days this kitchen was loud. Not always happy, no life isn't like that, but full. Arguments over screen time, spilled milk, hurried breakfasts before school. The clutter of life. And now I wipe down spotless counters that no one touches. I fold the same 2 dish towels every week. I clean the stove even though it barely gets used. I've become the keeper of a shrine no one visits. The chairs were different then, too. They had wear nicks and scratches from backpacks flung too hard, stickers half peeled off, gum hidden underneath. Now they're clean quiet, too quiet. I used to tell myself I wanted peace, but this isn't peace. This is absence, wearing a mask. I've thought about selling the house, downsizing maybe, finding a small apartment somewhere closer to other seniors, joining a knitting group, making friends with women who understand. But then what? Start over at this age. And besides, I'm afraid I'd wake up one day and forget what their voices sounded like. Here, at least, the walls remember. This kitchen remembers. I can still hear their laughter if I close my eyes and let the silence stretch long enough. I'm not sure I'd survive losing even that. Sometimes I set a plate for them anyway, just to pretend. I don't talk to it, Don't play make-believe. I'm not losing my mind, not yet. I just set it there. It helps somehow. Makes the meal feel less empty even if I don't touch the food on that plate. I wait until I'm done eating, then scrape it all into the trash. It's ridiculous, I know, but love doesn't always make sense. Sometimes it lingers in rituals that look like madness from the outside. After dinner, I wash the dishes slowly. One plate, one bowl, one spoon, one pair of chopsticks, then the untouched ones. I dried them with the towel that's grown soft from too many washings. My back ached, a little knees cracking when I bent. I've gotten used to the way age seeps in, not all at once, but quietly like a draft through a loose window. You don't notice it until you're cold. I looked out the window while I dried the last spoon. The street was quiet, dusky. A few kids riding bikes, a man walking a dog. Somewhere, life was going on. Somewhere, other mothers were hugging their children, sharing dinners, washing dishes together. I used to be one of them. I used to belong to a life with noise and mess and second helpings. Now I belong to quiet, to careful portions, to leftovers in plastic containers that go untouched. It's funny, I used to worry I wasn't doing enough, that I was working too much or not giving them enough time or not listening closely enough. But I tried. God, I tried. And I thought the kitchen proved it. I thought full plates and warm meals meant love. I thought they'd remember that. I thought they'd come back for it. But all I'm left with is a kitchen full of empty chairs and the knowledge that I cooked love into every meal, but it wasn't enough to make them stay. There's a folder on my phone labeled drafts. Not for emails, not for writing, just voice memos, little recordings I made on lonely afternoons or quiet nights when the silence in the house pressed too tightly against my chest. I never meant to send them, or maybe once I did. Maybe I thought I'd gather the courage one day to forward them along little audio postcards from a life they left behind. Some are only a few seconds long. It's raining today, I whisper in one. The good kind. The kind you used to dance in when you were small. I recorded that one standing by the window, watching droplets race each other down the glass, remembering the way their hair used to cling to their forehead, cheeks flushed with the joy of childhood. I smiled while I recorded it, but when I played it back, my voice sounded hollow, like someone pretending to be cheerful for a stranger who stopped caring. Another one is longer, almost 3 minutes. In it, I talk about my new slippers. A silly topic, really. I just bought a pair with extra padding because my heels have been aching lately, and I rambled on about how I used to think these kinds of things were signs of getting old, but now I just think comfort is underrated. I laughed at my own joke. A soft, short laugh, the kind that fades before it really begins. I never sent that one either. Some of the memos are just silence, or breath, or the quiet rustle of pages as I flipped through a photo album. One of them has the faint sound of a teacup being set down, and then my voice almost startled saying, "I miss you today, but I'm okay." That one I think was real. That one still makes my throat ache when I listen to it. I haven't deleted it. I can't. I don't know why I record them. Maybe it's a form of prayer. Maybe I just need to feel like someone is listening even if they never hear. It's not the same as talking to myself, not quite. It's more like talking to a version of them that still loved me, that still replied, that didn't erase me with a tap. Some people write letters they never send. I talk into my phone alone at the kitchen table, or while I fold laundry, or when the sun hits the window just right and makes the dust sparkle like something sacred. I pretend for a moment that the voice memo is a phone call, that I'll press send and it'll light up their screen, and maybe, just maybe, they'll hear the tremble behind my words and call me back, but I don't send them, because hope hurts worse than silence when it's shattered. One day, I accidentally hit play on one of the older ones while I was scrolling through photos. I didn't recognize my voice at first. It was so light, so full of warmth. I was talking about the first flower that bloomed in the garden that spring, a tiny yellow thing that had forced its way through dry soil and late frost. I called it brave. I compared it to them. I said, "You always reminded me of the daffodils, stubborn and beautiful, blooming when no one expected it." The metaphor feels heavier now, heavier than I meant it. I keep thinking I should delete them all. A clean break. Let go of the habit, stop fooling myself into believing that there's still a thread between us, thin and invisible, just waiting to be pulled. But I can't. Because sometimes the sound of my own voice speaking to them is the closest I get to feeling like a mother again. I wonder what they would say if they ever heard one. Would they roll their eyes the way they used to when I told the same stories too often? Would they recognize the quiet ache between my words, or would they just feel annoyed? Another example of me not respecting boundaries or whatever phrase they've decided makes me the villain. I know how it sounds. I know I'm not supposed to cling. I've read the books, seen the online posts. Toxic parents, emotional manipulation, learn to cut ties for your own mental health. Maybe I'm one of those. Maybe I was. But I was also a woman who tucked them in every night for 16 years, who held their hands through heartbreaks, who worked double shifts so they could go on that field trip, have that uniform, attend that camp. I was the one who stood quietly in the back of every recital, clapping harder than anyone. But none of that shows up in a block list. None of that matters when a heart goes cold. So I record quiet little love letters in the dark. I say things I wish they knew, not to guilt them, just to speak it aloud. Like your room still smells like your shampoo. Or I made your favorite soup today, and I hope you're eating well wherever you are. Or just I miss the way you used to laugh. Some people knit, some bake. I record voice memos I'll never send. I wonder if that's pathetic. But then I remember I'm not doing it to be pitied. I'm doing it because the love doesn't stop even when the conversation does. It changes shape. It softens. It sits quietly like a flame under glass. It still wants to be heard even if no one is listening. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe it has to be. It wasn't sudden. That's the part that hurts the most. How quiet the falling away was. No final blow-up, no slam door, no screaming match to mark the moment everything changed. Just small things, subtle things. A message left unanswered, a little too long. A birthday call that didn't come. A visit that kept getting pushed back next weekend, next month, maybe around the holidays. I told myself not to be dramatic. People get busy. Lives get full. But somewhere between the polite postponements and the lukewarm replies, I began to disappear from their life. And I let it happen. I replay it sometimes, the timeline of our unraveling. I wish I could pinpoint a moment, a line I crossed, something I could fix. But it wasn't like that. It was 1,000 grains of sand slipping through fingers, moments I didn't recognize as loss, until the weight of their absence became unbearable. A conversation that didn't go deep, a hug that felt 1 second too short, eyes that didn't meet mine when we said goodbye. I felt it before I understood it. A soft distancing like fog rolling in slowly, making everything harder to see, harder to hold. We used to talk every day, just little things. What should I make for dinner? Guess what happened at work today? You won't believe what the dog did. I saved those conversations, hoarded them in my memory like sunlight in winter. I thought we were close. I thought I had done something right. But then the calls became texts. The texts became rare, and the silence became the new rhythm. I clung to the belief that it was temporary, that they were going through something, that life would bring them back to me eventually. But life didn't, and they didn't. I tried to ask once, not in an accusing way, just gently, cautiously, like a person tiptoeing across a frozen lake. "Is everything okay between us?" I typed. The reply came 5 hours later. "Yeah, just busy." I read it again and again. Just busy. 2 words that felt like a fist closing around my heart. I didn't ask again. I started second-guessing every memory. Was I too controlling? Too emotional? Not supportive enough? Did I talk too much? Listen too little? I raked through the past like someone searching for a lost ring in sand. Desperate, exhausted, willing to sift through every gritty piece of myself for something shiny that might redeem me. But all I found were shadows, moments that could have been better, words I wish I'd swallowed. But also so many times I showed up when it would have been easier not to. So many sacrifices I made quietly, like mothers do. So much love. It's easy to believe the worst about yourself when someone you love walks away. It feels safer somehow to carry the blame than to sit with the mystery. At least blame gives you something to hold, something to do. But mystery just leaves you alone in a room full of questions. I talked to a neighbor about it once, not in detail, just enough to hint. She nodded with knowing eyes and said, "Kids grow up. They get their own lives. It's normal." But this doesn't feel normal. This feels personal, like I was a chapter they were eager to close, like I had become an obligation instead of a mother. I wonder if they tell their friends anything about me. I wonder if I'm a villain in their stories, now the overbearing mother, the one who couldn't let go, the one who made everything about herself. It terrifies me that I may live in their mind as a warning instead of a comfort. And yet, when they were little, I was their entire world. I remember the way their tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the way they'd reach for me in the middle of the night, trusting that I'd be there. I was the one who made monsters go away. I was the one who could make pain better, with a kiss and a whisper. What happens to that kind of love? Where does it go? Sometimes I wonder if it's just the way the world is now. Everyone's so absorbed in their own lives, their own therapy terms, their own boundaries and personal growth. And I respect that, truly I do. But somewhere along the line, protecting your peace has started to mean cutting people off without warning. And when you're the one cut, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like exile. I want to believe we can find our way back, that this isn't the ending, just a season, that maybe someday they'll miss me too. Not because I want them to hurt, but because I want to believe the bond we had was real enough to be missed. But I also know I can't keep waiting at a door that never opens. I've stood on that porch too long. My feet hurt, my heart aches, and no one's coming to unlock it from the other side. So I sit here quietly gathering the pieces, not trying to make sense of them, just trying to remember how it felt when love was simple, when connection was easy, when Mom misses you would have been enough to bring them home. I don't know why I do it to myself. Maybe it's morbid curiosity, or maybe it's that tiny part of me that still hopes to find a trace of myself in their world, even if I have to search from the outside. Late at night, I open my phone and type their name into the search bar of that app they once told me I was too old to understand. The one with the endless scrolling and perfect pictures. I don't follow them anymore, I can't, but their profile is still public for now. And what I find there makes my chest go tight in a way I can't quite explain. They look happy, genuinely dazzlingly happy. There's a picture of them at a birthday dinner, not mine, of course. Candles glowing, friends laughing, arms thrown around each other. There's a group trip to the mountains, then another by the sea. All smiles, drinks raised to the sun hair, tousled just so. I click through quietly. I don't know the names of the people beside them anymore. New friends, new family maybe. People who weren't there when they had chickenpox or got their heart broken in 8th grade. People who didn't learn how to braid their hair or memorize their favorite bedtime stories. And yet now, those people get their laughter, their presence, their love. It's a strange kind of grief, this digital kind. Like standing outside a window and watching a party you weren't invited to. They're not hiding me that might hurt less. No, they've simply built a world where I never existed. A timeline scrubbed clean of childhood photos, of tagged memories, of mother-shaped footprints. And maybe it's petty, but I notice. I notice the absence of everything I gave. There are no pictures of home, no trace of the room I painted just for them, the birthday cakes I made from scratch, the piano recitals I never missed. Just a clean, curated life that starts where I ended. I saw a photo once that made my hand shake. It was them with a woman I'd never met, arms linked, captioned something like "my second mom." I had to read it twice. The words blurred. I don't remember what I did next. Maybe I shut the app. Maybe I cried. Maybe I just sat there too stunned for anything else. My first instinct was to defend myself, even silently. I wanted to scream, "I was your first mom. I am your only mom." But instead, I just sat in the dark heart, aching in places I didn't know were still alive. That post is still there. I haven't looked at it again. But I think about it sometimes, how easy it is to replace someone when no one else remembers the beginning. I don't resent them for moving on. I don't want them to be lonely. I truly, truly don't. I just didn't think I'd be erased so completely. I thought foolishly that a mother's presence stayed imprinted somehow, even when the relationship shifted. I thought the bond we had was stronger than pixels and phone settings, but apparently even love can be archived. And still I scroll. Not every night, but often enough that I can no longer pretend I don't care. I look at their smiles, trying to guess if any of them are strained, if there's any sadness hiding behind the curve of their mouth. But no, they look radiant, free, as if cutting me off was the final step in a long journey towards self-actualization. And maybe it was. Maybe I really was the weight they needed to drop. But if that's true, then what does that make all those years a burden, an obligation, a cage? Sometimes I catch myself wanting to comment on a post, just something small. "You look beautiful." Or, "That place reminds me of that trip we took when you were 12. But I don't. I've learned not to. The silence they've built is not accidental. It's a wall, not a pause. And I won't be the one to knock against it anymore, at least not out loud. There are moments when I imagine they'll scroll past a memory of me, maybe an old photo buried in their camera roll, or a message I sent on a birthday years ago. Maybe, just maybe, they'll feel a flicker, a sting, a softness. But then I remember they've made a world where I don't exist, and people rarely mourn what they've already decided to forget. I try to be better. I try not to linger too long in their curated lives. I remind myself that online isn't real, that behind every smile is a mess no filter can hide. But it's hard, so hard when you're watching the child you raised build a life in which you are not even a shadow. So I close the app. I make tea. I sit in my chair and stare at the window where my reflection looks older than it did last year. I tell myself I'm still real, that I existed, that I was there, that I mattered, even if the only place I live now is in memories I'm not sure they kept. Even if their world, the one with all the laughter and light, has no room left for me. I never claimed to be. I never wore that word like a crown perfect. I wore it like an itch, I could never quite scratch, always trying to reach it, always falling short. I was young when I became a mother, and scared more often than I let on. I didn't have a handbook, just instincts and borrowed advice, and a heart that beat louder whenever they cried. I did the best I could, but I've replayed my mistakes more times than I've remembered my successes, and maybe they have too. There were times I yelled when I should have paused, times I chose exhaustion over patience, times I didn't ask the right questions because I was too busy worrying about bills or deadlines or dinner. I think about the nights I sent them to bed, frustrated when all they wanted was one more story, one more minute of my attention. I remember the slammed doors, the cold silences, the tight-lipped good nights. Those are the moments that cling to me now sharper than the good ones. I wasn't gentle every time. I wasn't wise every time. I had days when I shut down when the weight of everything crushed me, until I became small and hard, the kind of mother who snapped at little things. And if those are the moments they remember, if those are the ones that define me in their mind, then I understand why they walked away. But I also remember the mornings I woke early just to watch them sleep, and the nights I stayed up sewing a costume or baking cupcakes from scratch because they'd asked so sweetly. I remember holding them after nightmares and saying, "I'm here. You're safe." I remember loving them with everything I had, even the parts of myself I didn't like, even the parts that had never been loved properly by anyone else. Sometimes I think about my own mother and how I judged her when I was young. I didn't understand the sacrifices she made, the silent ways she held our world together. I thought she was distant, cold even. But now I see her differently. Now I wonder how much pain she swallowed just to make things seem okay. I wonder if I made her feel like I feel now, erased, misunderstood, unwanted. Maybe this is the curse of motherhood, to give so completely that your absence feels like a betrayal when you finally ask for something in return. I never asked for much. Not really. I wanted to be part of their life. I wanted to be included in the small things, the holiday plans, the updates, the passing moments. I didn't want to control them. I just wanted to matter. But I think my longing came out wrong. Maybe they saw it as neediness. Maybe they felt smothered. Maybe my questions felt like guilt trips, my concern like manipulation. I can't know for sure. They never said. They just left. And still I forgive them. Not because it's easy, but because holding on to the pain would turn me into someone I don't want to be. I've seen mothers who let their bitterness sour everything, who speak only in wounds, who weaponize their love, who keep score. I don't want that. I want to keep the part of myself that loved them purely, even if I'll never get the chance to show it again. I also forgive myself slowly, imperfectly, day by day, because I know I tried. And trying isn't nothing. I showed up. I stayed. I endured. I loved. I bent myself in 100 times to make room for their needs. I failed sometimes, yes, but I also triumphed in quiet ways, ways that don't fit neatly into apology or defense. I think of one afternoon when they were 12. I had come home from work late, drained, head pounding, but they had had a rough day at school, and without thinking, I sat on the edge of their bed and listened for an hour. Just listened. I brushed their hair back from their forehead like I used to when they were small. I didn't fix anything. I just stayed. I wish I could hold that moment up like a photograph and say, "See, I was there. I was good sometimes too." But memory is selective, and grief doesn't always make room for grace. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about me in those quiet moments before sleep, the way I used to think about them when they were babies. I wonder if they regret anything. I don't need an apology. I just want to know if they still feel the thread, even if they won't tug on it. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't cruel. I wasn't careless. I was a woman doing her best with the tools she had, and yes, those tools were chipped and dulled and flawed, but they were mine, and I used them with love. I hope one day they'll remember the whole picture, not just the sharp corners. I hope they'll see me as human, not just as a disappointment. I hope they'll find space for the complexity of it all, for the love that lived inside the mess. And if they don't, then I will still sit here quietly whole, knowing that imperfect love is still real. That even broken things can be beautiful when you look at them with soft eyes. I gave them everything, not just the kind of everything people say casually. I mean the real, bone-deep kind. The sleepless nights, the dreams I postponed, the clothes I didn't buy so they could have better ones, the better cuts of meat, the last piece of fruit, the entire plate when they were still hungry, and I could pretend I wasn't. I gave them my time, my body, my silence. My youth slipped out of my hands in exchange for their comfort, their joy, their growth. And I didn't resent it, not at the time. It felt sacred, necessary, even beautiful. That's what a mother does, I told myself. That's what love means. But there are parts of me I'll never get back. They never saw it, not really. Children don't. That's not their fault. They saw the clean clothes appear in drawers, the lunches packed, the permission slips signed. They saw the dinner on the table, the lights on the smiles when they walked through the door. They didn't see the way I cried quietly in the bathroom some nights after they slammed their door and called me unfair. They didn't see the way my stomach turned when bills were due and the checking account was gasping. They didn't know how many times I said no to myself so I could say yes to them. And that's okay, that's how it should be. But what no one tells you is how it feels when the people you gave everything to walk away like you were never the one holding up their sky. They took what I couldn't keep, my 20s, my 30s, even parts of my 40s. They took the woman I might have been, and I gave her freely. Thinking love was supposed to cost that much, thinking that one day I'd be held in their heart as a kind of quiet hero, but instead I've become a distant memory they seem embarrassed by, or worse, indifferent to. I remember one Christmas when they were small. I was between jobs, scraping by. I pawned a piece of jewelry, a gift from my own mother, one of the few things I had left from her, just to buy them the doll they'd been dreaming about, the one with the glittery dress and the talking voice box. I wrapped it so carefully, tied the ribbon just right. The look on their face when they opened it made my chest ache with joy. That moment carried me through so many hard ones, and now I don't know if they even remember it. That doll, that Christmas, that sacrifice it, probably lives in some landfill, now broken and forgotten. And I suppose that's the way it goes. Children outgrow toys. They outgrow bedrooms. They outgrow mothers, too. I don't say any of this to make them feel guilty. I say it because I need to let it live somewhere outside of my chest. Carrying it alone all these years has begun to feel like a quiet kind of suffocation. I need someone, even if it's just the page or the empty room, to witness what was given. Because it's not about wanting anything back. I don't want payback or repayment or grand gestures. I want to be seen. I want to be remembered not as the woman who called too often or asked too many questions, but as the woman who gave so much of herself she had to relearn how to be a person when the giving stopped. There are wrinkles on my hands now that weren't there before. They came quietly like all things time does to a woman. My hair is thinner. My knees ache when I bend to garden, and sometimes I forget what I came into a room for. But what I never forget is the weight of their head on my chest when they were sick, the way they used to reach for me without thinking, the way they called for me in the night, because they truly believed that I could fix anything. And I tried. God, I tried. They took what I couldn't keep, the time, the health, the softness of youth, and they used it to build their own lives. That's the job, I suppose. That's what we sign up for. But some days I sit with the silence and wonder if they understand what it cost. If they've ever paused long enough to feel the shape of my absence and realize it was once the very ground beneath them. There are people who say motherhood is a thankless job. I don't believe that. I think it's just a quiet one. The thanks come in small ways, a glance, a word, a call. Or at least they used to. Now even those are gone. And I'm left with the echo of giving and the sharpness of what's no longer mine. Still, if I could go back, I don't know that I'd do it differently. I think I would still give, because love isn't measured in what we keep. It's measured in what we're willing to lose. And I was willing to lose everything. There's a kind of forgetting that feels worse than death. Death has ceremony, ritual, remembrance. But this is just erasure in slow motion. When I hear people talk about their grandchildren, the way their eyes light up, the way their phones come out with picture after picture, I smile politely. I nod. I ask the right questions. But inside I am quiet. I am a blank photo frame. Because my grandchildren don't know me. Not really. Not the way I hoped they would. I've never held them. Never fed them a spoonful of mashed banana. Never pressed my lips to their warm foreheads or traced their tiny fingers as they slept. I know their names, but only because I saw them once buried in a caption under a birthday photo. I stared at that post for hours, memorizing the curve of their cheeks, the shape of their eyes, wondering if those eyes would ever look at me with recognition, with love. Wondering if I'd ever hear them say the word grandma, or if someone else has already claimed that title in my absence. I used to dream of the kind of grandmother I'd be. I wanted to be the warm lap, the secret treat. Before dinner, the arms always open no matter what. I imagined storybooks and cookies, weekend visits, and whispered advice they couldn't tell their parents. I had planned for it. Saved little things, a box of old toys, some books from their parents' childhood, a quilt I started stitching when I first found out a quiet act of hope, thread by thread. It sits unfinished in my closet. No one asked me to visit. No one told me their birthdays or what they liked or how they were growing. I'm not even sure if they know I exist. Maybe they've been told stories, carefully curated stories, where I am a shadowy figure of conflict. Or worse, no stories at all. Maybe I've been edited out entirely, like I was never part of the beginning. The first time I heard one of them speak in a video, someone else showed me it hit me like a wave. That tiny voice, high and bright, giggling at something off screen. It felt like someone else's child. A stranger's joy. But deep inside, something in me responded like a magnet to metal. That's my blood, I thought. That's my story, walking around with new legs and a new laugh and no memory of me. Sometimes I write letters to them. Not ones I'll send, just pages in my journal addressed to children I may never meet. I tell them what their parent was like at their age. I tell them how fiercely I loved, how earnestly I tried, how much I wanted to be part of their world. I write down recipes I would have taught them, stories I would have told. I press flowers between the pages, like a grandmother from another time, hoping that maybe someday those words will find their way to them. There's an ache that comes from being unknown, especially when you gave your whole self to the people who made them possible. I look at old photos of my child, and I see glimpses of them in those faces, the tilt of a smile, the stubborn chin, the wild curls. They are the continuation of something I started, and yet they are kept from me like a secret. I wonder if they'll ever ask, did we have another grandma? Where is she? Why don't we see her? I wonder what they'll be told. I wonder if the story will be shaped with kindness or convenience. I hope, I pray that if they do hear of me, it will be with some sliver of compassion. Even if they're told I made mistakes, I hope it's said with a sigh, not a sneer. Because I was never the villain. I was just broken in places I didn't know how to name, and I loved with hands that sometimes shook. The hardest part is not knowing if I'll ever meet them, if I'll get the chance to look into their eyes and see recognition bloom, to hear them say I didn't know. I'm glad I know now. Or to feel their small arms around my waist even just once. I don't need years. I don't need a dozen holidays. I would settle for a single hour, just enough to say, you are loved. You were always loved. But I may not get that hour. So I love them from here, from the quiet space I inhabit. I love them through the walls, through the distance, through the silence. I light a candle for them on their birthdays, even when I don't know the date. I imagine them strong, kind, resilient. I imagine them full of light. I send that wish into the world and hope it wraps around them somehow, like a whisper they can't quite place. And when people ask, do you have grandchildren, I smile and say yes, even if they don't know my name. It wasn't something I planned. I was in the neighborhood for a dentist appointment just a few streets away. I had the address saved in my mind like a prayer I wasn't supposed to speak aloud. I told myself I was just curious, that I just wanted to see it, the house where they lived, now the life they'd built. I didn't intend to stop. I certainly didn't intend to park. But I did. I drove past once slow, then again, even slower. The third time I turned off onto a side street and stopped the car. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I sat there for a long time, engine off, heat fading from the vents. I felt like an intruder, like a ghost peering into the window of the living. It was a tidy house. White fence, small porch, a child's bike tipped over near the steps. There was a wind chime swaying from the eaves, catching bits of sun. Curtains drawn halfway open. It looked peaceful, lived in, happy even. I didn't know what I'd expected: chaos, emptiness, some visual confirmation that my absence had created a hole, but there was no hole, just life continuing without me. I didn't get out of the car. I watched for a while, hoping, though I wouldn't admit it to myself, that someone might come outside, that I'd see their face again, even for a second, that maybe, miraculously, they'd look in my direction and feel something, a tug, a shimmer, an echo of connection. But the curtains didn't move. The door stayed shut. No one came out. So I sat. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just existed. There was a moment, small, barely worth mentioning, when I thought I saw them through the window. A blur of motion, a figure passing by. My breath caught. My hand went to the door handle, but I didn't move. Because what would I have said? Hi, I was just driving by. It would have sounded pathetic, stalkerish, desperate, and I had promised myself I wouldn't beg. Still, I stayed for almost an hour. There's something unholy about watching your child live a life that doesn't include you, something that tears through your gut, slow and deliberate, like fabric being ripped, thread by thread. I thought about all the times I'd opened doors for them, all the times I'd waited up pacing hallways when they were late. I thought about the keys I used to keep in my pocket keys, to houses that once held both of us. And now I didn't even have permission to knock. I saw the mailbox with their last name printed neatly on the side. It was a name I had chosen once, written on birth certificates, and school forms, and Christmas stockings. And now it belonged to a life I wasn't invited into, a life I had helped create, now closed to me. like a locked garden gate. I imagined walking up the path. I imagined ringing the bell, hands trembling, trying to smile. I imagined them opening the door and freezing eyes wide, mouth tense. I imagined that moment stretching too long. I imagined a child peeking from behind their leg, asking who was that, and them replying, "No one." That's what stopped me. That moment, that possibility. I couldn't bear to become no one. So I stayed in the car. I whispered their name once just to hear how it sounded in the air. I whispered it the way I used to when they were sleeping, soft and careful, like a secret. I tried to picture their voice, but it's grown fuzzy in my mind. I used to know it better than my own. Now it slips away from me syllable by syllable. Eventually, I started the car. I pulled away slowly, not looking back. I took the long way home through streets we used to drive together. I passed the old park where they'd once fallen off the swing and cried until I kissed the scrape. I passed the ice cream shop where we used to split one scoop chocolate with extra sprinkles. Ghosts in every corner of the city. Ghosts that only I can see. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. I looked like a woman who had waited outside her child's house for a glimpse of something already gone, and that's exactly what I was. But I don't regret going. I needed to see it. I needed to know that they were real, that they still existed in this world, even if not in mine. I needed to remind myself that love doesn't always get a seat at the table. Sometimes it sits outside in a parked car, quietly watching, quietly aching, quietly letting go. I haven't been back since. But sometimes late at night I picture the house again. I wonder if the wind chime still sings. I wonder if the bike is now too small. I wonder if one day they'll look out the window and feel something strange, something distant, something like a mother's love, still echoing in the quiet. I remember wrapping the last one, a little sweater, soft gray with tiny buttons shaped like stars. I folded it neatly, tissue paper tucked gently around it the way I used to fold their baby clothes. I even included a handwritten note, just something to keep the little one warm. I hope it fits. My handwriting has changed with age, more fragile now, like it's trying not to be seen. But I still wrote it slowly, carefully, with love stitched into every curve. I mailed it to their new address, the one I wasn't supposed to have. I'd gotten it from a mutual friend, someone who felt sorry for me but didn't want to get involved. I told myself it wasn't overstepping. It was a gesture, not a request. A way of saying I still care. I still remember. I still exist. And for a few days after I felt lighter, hopeful even. Like maybe the box would arrive and open something that had been closed for too long. But a week later it came back. Still sealed, still perfect. Returned to sender. The label was scratched out in thick black marker, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was theirs. I stared at the box on my doorstep for a long time, heart pounding like a child caught stealing something sweet. I didn't bring it in right away. I just stood there, one hand on the doorknob, the other gripping the corner of the box like it might explode. When I finally opened it, everything was just as I'd left it, untouched, unsent, unloved. I unfolded the sweater, then folded it back again. I placed the note in a drawer I haven't opened since. That wasn't the first time it happened. There were other boxes, small things, thoughtful things. A book I thought they'd like, a mug with a quote from their favorite childhood story, a little blanket I crocheted during the long evenings when the silence grew too loud. I didn't expect thank yous, but I didn't expect them to come back either, unopened, unwanted. It's a specific kind of pain watching your love return to you like a rejection letter. Seeing your intentions wrapped in care and memory, tossed back like something inappropriate or dangerous, as if the gift carried a threat instead of warmth. I never sent anything extravagant, just tokens, pieces of myself I still wanted to give. I thought maybe the act of giving would remind them of who I was, of what I still held in my hands even after all this time. But every package that came back felt like a door slamming harder, like they were saying, "Not only do I not want you, I don't even want reminders that you exist." I started keeping the boxes in the closet, not out of sentimentality, just shame, maybe. I couldn't throw them away. That felt too final, but I couldn't look at them either. So they live behind coats and old blankets stacked like the evidence of a failed trial. One day I opened one of them and found that the tissue paper had wrinkled at the corners. The note had yellowed slightly. Time still moves even for the things that are refused. Love grows old too, even if it's never used. I know I should stop. I know that by now any attempt to reach them just reinforces the wall. But something about birthdays, holidays, even the change of seasons, it pulls at me. I see a soft scarf in a shop window and think, they'd like that. I see a children's book and remember reading that exact story to them when they were sick with a fever. These little moments hit like waves, always when I least expect them. And for a few seconds I forget I'm unwelcome. I don't send anything anymore. I've learned. But the instinct hasn't left. It's still there, sitting just beneath my skin, like a habit formed in the old world, the world where I mattered. Sometimes I imagine them opening one of the boxes. I imagine them reading the note. I imagine a tear, a pause, a moment of softening. Maybe I misjudged her. Maybe it's time. But that's just another story I tell myself at night to fall asleep. The truth is, they saw the name on the label and chose to send it back. And that says everything. Love doesn't always look like a hug or a phone call. Sometimes love looks like a sweater no one ever wore, folded in a box that never got past the doorstep. Sometimes love is what you send even when you know it won't be received. And sometimes the greatest act of love is to stop sending anything at all. There's a question I try not to ask myself out loud. It feels too dangerous, like saying it will make it more real, but it hums underneath everything like a low chord in the background of my days. What did I raise them for? Not in anger, not usually, more in bewilderment, in aching confusion, because I poured everything into them. Every ounce of care, every spare second of my youth, every part of myself that mattered. I raised them with the belief that love given freely and consistently would grow into something lasting, something that would come back to me in time, like a bloom from a well-tended garden. Instead, I got silence. And I ask myself, was it me? Did I raise them to be too independent, too self-sufficient? Did I teach them so well how to walk alone that they decided never to look back? I wanted them to be strong. That was always the goal. I wanted them to know how to stand tall in this world, how to make decisions, how to speak their mind. I didn't want them to be afraid of life. But now I wonder if I gave them all the tools for flight and forgot to teach them how to stay grounded in love. There's a bitterness that creeps in when I think about all the things I said no to so they could say yes. The promotions I passed up because they needed me home. The dreams I deferred so theirs could take root. The nights I lay awake worrying about their future while mine quietly evaporated. I raised them to be someone's partner, someone's parent, someone's friend. But somehow in all that shaping, I carved myself right out of the picture. Maybe that's the cruel irony of motherhood. You spend years building a person with your own hands, and when they're finally whole enough to walk away, they do. I know the world tells us that's the goal, that a child leaving means you did something right, but no one tells you how empty it feels when the goodbye isn't a celebration, but an erasure. when the departure doesn't come with gratitude or warmth, but with blocked numbers and unopened mail. I don't want to sound ungrateful. There were years, many years, when we laughed, when we loved each other out loud. I remember car rides with music blaring, dancing in the kitchen the way they used to bring me wildflowers and crumpled napkins. Those moments were real. I believe in them, but they feel like they happen to someone else now. A different version of me, a different version of them. Sometimes I see parents out in public with their grown children sharing coffee, teasing, chatting, and it hits me like a punch I never see coming. I wonder what those parents did that I didn't. I wonder what tiny, imperceptible choices led to that closeness instead of this chasm. Was I too soft, too hard? Did I ask too much? Not enough? Did I hover? Was I distant? Did I say something once that they never forgot, even though I've long forgotten it myself? There's no post-mortem for a relationship like this. No report that says, here's where it all went wrong. Here's the moment the bridge cracked. I only know that I look up one day and realize the bridge is gone, and I'm standing on one side with nothing but the memory of having once crossed it. What did I raise them for? I raised them to be kind, though they no longer speak to me. I raised them to be loyal, though they've turned away. I raised them to be brave, though it's me who's left to face this quiet courage, the courage of being forgotten and still choosing to love. Sometimes in the quiet moments, I allow myself to wonder what it would be like if they came back, if they walked through the door and said, I'm sorry. I was angry. I didn't know how much it would hurt you, and I know what I'd do. I wouldn't ask for explanations. I wouldn't list the ways they failed me. I would just open my arms. Because I didn't raise them to owe me anything. I raised them to be loved. And even now, even after all of this, that love hasn't gone anywhere. It's quieter, sadder, more cautious. But it's still there, sitting in my chest like a light that refuses to go out. I think about the woman I was before I had them. She was bright-eyed, eager, maybe a little lost. She thought motherhood would save her, give her purpose, and in a way, it did. But it also took something from her that she never got back, something raw and private and essential. That woman disappeared under layers of laundry and school drop-offs and whispered lullabies. I don't resent her. I just miss her sometimes. So what did I raise them for? To live, to become, to walk their path without stumbling. I just never imagined they'd walk it so far from me. It was just a group chat. Or that's what I told myself when I first noticed I was no longer in it. A little blinking silence where there used to be constant updates, emojis, photos, links, family things, everyday things, memes I didn't always understand, inside jokes I pretended to get. But still it meant I was included, still part of something, even if only in the background. And then one day it was gone. I wasn't notified. There was no message saying we're starting a new thread, no soft explanation, no accidental. Oh, sorry, I must have left you out. Just absence. Like a window I used to look through had been boarded shut overnight. I opened the app like I always did. I checked the usual thread and it was gone. Or I was. It took a few seconds to register. I scrolled through my messages thinking maybe I missed something. But no, there was no mistake. I hadn't left. I had been removed. Quietly. Deliberately. Like a whisper no one wanted me to hear. At first I laughed. That nervous kind of laugh that bubbles up when you're trying not to feel the sting. It's just a chat, I told myself. It's not personal. People make new ones all the time. But in my chest, something tightened. Because it wasn't just a chat. It was proof. Proof that there were conversations happening without me. Plans being made, holidays arranged, photos shared, all without my name ever being typed again. That group chat, had been a lifeline for me, a small, flickering thread of connection. I didn't speak much, I knew my role. I hit the heart reaction. I said beautiful on baby pictures. I added smiley faces. I didn't overstep. I didn't try to mother anyone. I just stayed in the corner of that digital room, grateful to be there. And now I wasn't. I don't know when they removed me. Maybe after I sent one too many messages that got no reply. Maybe after I commented on something they didn't like. Or maybe it was just time in their minds to let go of the person I used to be to them. Whatever the reason, it was done. No warning, no farewell, just gone. I stared at the empty space on my phone for longer than I'd like to admit. I kept reopening the app as if the icon might magically reappear, as if it had all been a mistake. But the mistake was believing I was still wanted there in the first place. Later that day, I opened the photo album where I used to save the images they shared. First steps, new jobs, that one blurry picture of everyone on the couch last Thanksgiving, before things got strange. I scrolled through them slowly. So much life captured in pixels, and now I was a stranger to it all. It felt like watching a movie I used to be in now, replaced by a new actress, younger and easier to love. What hurt most wasn't the chat itself. It was what it symbolized, the quiet revoking of my presence, the subtle, polite excommunication. It told me, we're moving on. We're fine without you. In fact, it's better this way. I didn't respond. I didn't ask why. What would I have said? Did you mean to remove me? That kind of message invites pity, not reconciliation. And I've learned slowly, painfully, that chasing closeness only pushes it further away. So I stayed silent. I deleted the app, then reinstalled it 2 days later just to check. Nothing had changed. I started noticing other things too. Social media posts I wasn't tagged in, birthday events I wasn't told about. The way my name no longer appeared in shared calendars or forwarded emails. The slow fade out of my existence in the little corners where family used to live. I felt like a character written out of the story, but still watching from backstage, still knowing my lines, still remembering how it used to feel to belong. That chat had once buzzed with life. I used to smile when my phone lit up, even if it was just a short clip of someone's dog or a photo of a burnt casserole. It wasn't the content, it was the inclusion. The gentle reminder that even now, even quietly, I was part of the fold. But now the silence is sharper. I don't check my phone as often. I've stopped saving photos. I've stopped composing little replies in my head that will never be sent. Somewhere the conversation goes on without me. Somewhere they're laughing at things I'll never hear, planning things I'll never be invited to, moving through a version of life where I've become a footnote. But still I remember the sound of their voice. I remember the way they once called me just to say good night. I remember the way we used to type "love you" at the end of every message, even the silly ones. I carry those echoes like a charm bracelet missing its clasp. And I remind myself being forgotten in silence doesn't erase the years you gave in full voice. There's a moment I think every mother who's been left behind knows it, when you realize begging won't bring them back. It doesn't matter how softly you speak, how gently you phrase your apologies, how carefully you lay your love at their feet. They've already decided. And every time you reach out, you're not pulling them closer. You're pushing yourself further away. I didn't want to believe that at first. I told myself I just needed to explain better, to say it the right way. I rewrote texts 12 times before sending them. I said I missed them, but not in a way that would pressure them. I said I was here for them always, but never asked them to be here for me. I gave space. I gave silence. I gave love, and still nothing came back. I left voicemails I later deleted out of shame. One where I just said, "I hope you're eating enough," Another where I laughed nervously and asked if they still liked that band they used to play on repeat when they were 17, and one that ended in a whisper, "I love you, that's all." Each time I hung up, I felt like I was peeling away another layer of dignity, hoping I'd finally struck the right chord, hoping this would be the one that reminded them I'm still here. I never stopped being your mother. But nothing changed. At some point, the begging became a mirror showing me not their absence but mine, the empty parts of myself I'd been trying to fill with their validation, their forgiveness, their approval, as if I couldn't know who I was unless they reflected it back to me. That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't begging for them. I was begging to not be forgotten. I used to think silence meant hope, that if they weren't yelling, if they weren't cruel, if they weren't saying awful things, then maybe they were just waiting, healing, processing. But silence can be loud in its own way. It can say everything they're unwilling to speak. It can scream, "You're not welcome," without making a sound. I had to stop listening for footsteps that weren't coming. I had to stop writing letters I knew would never be opened. I had to stop making space for someone who refused to walk through the door. It was hard at first, like withdrawing from a drug. I'd reach for my phone with a thought. They would love this song. They'd laugh at this memory, and I'd stop mid-swipe, mid-hope. I started talking out loud to no one, just to hear my thoughts unjudged, just to remind myself that my voice still existed even if they didn't hear it anymore. The worst part was the guilt, that nagging voice. What if you're giving up too soon? What if they're just hurting and you're walking away before they heal? But I wasn't walking away. I was standing still, arms outstretched, until my shoulders ached and my hands were empty. And one day I realized that kind of waiting isn't love. It's self-erasure. So I put the phone down. I turned the ringer off. I stopped checking the mail, stopped refreshing the inbox, stopped watching the last seen timestamp like it was a heartbeat. I started learning how to sit in the quiet and not flinch, to breathe without bracing, to speak my own name and know it still held weight. People think letting go is an event, a dramatic gesture, a final fight. But for me it was quiet, a slow detachment, like loosening a knot that's too tight to cut. It took time, patience, forgiveness not for them, not of them but for myself. And somewhere in that stillness, I found a small, tender truth. I don't need to beg to be loved. I don't need to make myself smaller, softer, sweeter, just to be allowed back into a life I helped create. If my love, all those years of sacrifice and devotion and care, wasn't enough to keep the door open, then no sentence I speak now will force the lock. I am not a plea. I am not a problem to be solved. I am a woman who gave her best, and if that isn't welcome anymore, then it's not mine to fix. These days I still think of them. Of course I do. I always will. But I no longer try to earn their love like it's a prize. I no longer see their silence as my punishment. I see it for what it is. A boundary I didn't ask for but now respect. And maybe in a way that's the real kind of love. Not chasing, not begging, but knowing when to let go and still loving anyway. The silence they left behind used to terrify me. At first, it echoed like a punishment, loud, heavy, all-consuming. Every room in my house felt like a courtroom where I was on trial for crimes I didn't understand. But over time, something strange happened. I started to hear something new in the stillness. Me. At first it was faint, just a thought here, a whisper there, small reflections I'd once drowned out in the noise of trying to be everything for everyone. But slowly, with no one left to perform for, no one to please, no one to disappoint, I began to find the sound of my own voice again. Not the mother's voice, Not the peacemaker's voice, not the one I used to soothe tantrums or smooth over tension, but the voice underneath all that. The voice I had before I was anyone's anything. She was quieter than I remembered. Gentler, too. I started talking to myself in the mornings, not in madness, but in memory. "What do you feel like eating today?" I'd ask aloud, standing in front of the fridge. "Do you want to go for a walk or just sit in the sun?" I gave myself choices as if I were someone worthy of them, as if I were someone worth caring for. And I was. I began to notice things I'd forgotten to see. The way the afternoon light hit the kitchen tiles. The sound of the kettle just before it clicks off. The comfort of old slippers on cold floors. I found small routines that belonged only to me. Watering the plants on Tuesdays, listening to the same record on Sunday evenings, brushing my hair slowly, not because I was rushing to be presentable, but because I liked the way it felt. I spoke more freely in my journal. My handwriting, once cramped and anxious, began to loosen. I stopped writing letters to them and started writing letters to myself, the woman I'd neglected, the friend I'd forgotten. I'd begin with "Dear Me," and I'd end with something kind. I'd remind myself of what I survived, what I gave, what I still carry even now. There were no grand epiphanies, no overnight transformations, just a slow, quiet thawing. I remembered that I used to love poetry, that I used to sing in the car when no one was listening, that I once dreamed of taking a painting class, something I never did because weekends were always for soccer games or grocery runs or last-minute school projects. But now the weekends are mine, and the quiet doesn't feel like punishment anymore. It feels like possibility. Some days are still heavy. The silence does still ache. I still catch myself picking up my phone, ready to send a message I know will never be answered. But now, instead of sending it, I speak the words aloud to the room, just so my voice stays used to being heard, just so I don't forget what I sound like when I'm not asking for permission. There's power in that. The kind of power I didn't know I had, because I was too busy giving it away in teaspoons, a little here, a little there, until I was empty and didn't know why. But now I do. I gave too much of myself, not just to them, but away from me. I thought love meant self-erasure, that to be a good mother, I had to become invisible. I thought martyrdom was holy and silence was strength, but that's not true. You can love with your whole heart and still keep a piece of it for yourself. Now I speak more clearly, even when no one's listening, especially then. I talk to my reflection. I talk to my teacup. I talk to the moon when it hangs low and full over the backyard. And I say things I needed to hear years ago. You matter even now. You don't need to be someone's favorite to be worthy. You are allowed to exist even in their absence. I don't know if they'll ever return, if I'll ever get to say any of these things to them. But maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe the real gift isn't them hearing me. It's me hearing myself after all these years of silence. My voice was never lost. It was just buried under layers of longing and noise and unreturned messages. But it's here now, tired, but steady, soft, but certain, and it belongs to me. I still love them, but I love me too. And that is a voice worth listening to. There's a kind of peace that comes not from getting what you wanted, but from finally putting it down, from loosening your grip on the thing you chased for so long, the thing that never turned around, never reached back. I think that's where I am now. I don't chase anymore. Not because I've stopped loving them. No, that kind of love doesn't just stop. It lingers even when it's uninvited. But I've stopped trying to prove it. I've stopped trying to earn the right to be remembered. I used to think that if I just said the right thing or gave it enough time or softened myself into something less difficult, less demanding, less mother, they'd come back. I thought love meant waiting with the porch light on the door cracked open, always ready. But all it did was keep me in a state of constant reaching arms outstretched to an absence that never filled. Now my arms are at my sides, my hands are quiet, my eyes are no longer trained on the door. There is grief in that, but there's freedom too. I've come to understand that not every wound gets stitched. Some stay open and you simply learn to live around them. You stop pressing against them, stop picking at the edges. You let the air touch them raw as they are, and you find your strength not in the healing, but in the fact that you keep living anyway. I go on walks now without checking my phone. I pass playgrounds without imagining their children running up to me laughing, calling out a name they don't know belongs to me. I sit in cafes and don't flinch at the sound of the door opening, hoping. I've stopped waiting for their voice in a crowd. There are days, of course there are, when the weight of silence returns, when something ordinary like a scent or a song sends my heart into a spin. But instead of reaching for my phone or drafting another unsent letter, I take a breath. I remind myself, you already tried, you already gave, and then I let the moment pass. People ask sometimes if I've spoken to them lately. I just smile and say not in a while. I don't explain. I don't unravel the knot of what happened or didn't. I don't plead my case anymore, because I've learned that some people don't want the whole story. They just want the tidy version. And I've stopped trying to make my pain small enough to fit inside other people's comfort. The truth is, I did everything I could. I showed up. I loved fully. I apologized when I was wrong, even when I didn't understand what I'd done. I held out hope like a torch in a storm. But there comes a time when even the brightest flame must be shielded not for their sake, but for your own, because you cannot burn forever without becoming ash. So now I pour my energy into things that grow. I tend my little garden tomatoes, basil, a rose bush I planted last spring. I bake bread that fills the house with warmth, even if no one is here to eat it with me. I read books I never had time for when they were small and needed everything from me. I make tea in the afternoons and sit by the window with my old radio humming. Sometimes I hum along. Sometimes I just listen. And in those moments I don't feel abandoned. I feel whole. Because I remember now that I was never just a mother. I was always a woman too. A girl before that. A person with her own story separate from theirs. I gave them chapters, years, everything, and I would again. But now this part is mine. I no longer knock on locked doors. I no longer whisper into voids. I no longer shrink myself into silence waiting to be wanted. I don't chase anymore. And still I am here. I am alive. I am enough. The house is still tonight. The kind of stillness that feels earned, not lonely. I sit by the window with a blanket over my knees, tea cooling in my hands, and the soft hum of the night pressing gently against the glass. Outside, the moon hangs like a silver promise, quiet, unblinking, patient. I find myself breathing slower, deeper. No one is coming. But that doesn't hurt like it used to. I think there's a grace in aging that no one warns you about. Not just the aches and the slowing down, but the shedding. The gradual release of things you once clung to, recognition, approval, even understanding. In their place comes a strange kind of clarity, a soft knowing, a trust in your own footsteps, even if no one is walking beside you anymore. I've stopped rehearsing conversations that will never happen. I've stopped rereading old messages like they hold the key to a door that's long been locked. I've stopped asking why. Some questions don't need answers to be let go of. They just need silence and the strength to leave them there. I still love them. That hasn't changed. But love isn't always loud. It doesn't always call or write or wait by the phone. Sometimes it's the act of letting someone go without bitterness, of wishing them well in your heart, even if you'll never hear from them again, of remembering them softly, not as the ones who hurt you, but as the ones you once held, once fed, once sang to in the dark. And I remember myself too. Not just the mother I was, but the woman I am now. She is quieter, yes, a little lonelier perhaps, but not broken, not forgotten, not by herself at least. She moves through her days with care, speaks to herself with kindness, fills her time with things that nourish. She is not waiting anymore. She is living. I didn't need to be loud. I just needed to leave. They forgot me, but I never forgot myself. I gave them silence, and in it I found peace.